It was a dark, rainy night in the small town of Crestwood. The rain pounded hard against the windows of the fire station, creating a monotonous sound that seemed to amplify the early morning silence. The city was plunged into the stillness of the night, but this tranquility would be shattered by an event that would forever change the lives of the Crestwood firefighters. Chief Anderson, a man with many years of experience and gray hair, was on duty that night. He spent the early hours making routine notes and checking the condition of firefighting equipment. His tired eyes remained fixed on the rain that ran down the station window. It was then that the emergency phone started ringing, shattering the early morning silence. Chief Anderson quickly picked up the receiver and answered the call. A shaky voice on the other end of the line reported a fire in an abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town. "Please, you have to come quickly. The mansion is on fire." The voice was full of panic. Chief Anderson remained calm, asking questions to obtain crucial information. After confirming the location and nature of the emergency, he nodded and said the team would be on their way. The night call was unusual. The mansion in question was known for its dark history and remote location on the outskirts of the city. It was an old and abandoned structure that few dared to approach, especially at night. It was often considered haunted, and stories of strange events and sinister figures stalking the property circulated in the city. However, Crestwood firefighters were known for their professionalism and courage, and the team did not hesitate to prepare for the mission. The firefighters had already faced fires in equally challenging places and believed that the mission would be just another night job. As they geared up and checked the firefighting vehicles, the storm outside raged in full force. Thunder echoed in the sky, and lightning periodically illuminated the fire station, creating a scene worthy of a horror film. The sound of howling wind echoed through the building, making the atmosphere even more gloomy. The fire team finally boarded the vehicles and headed towards the abandoned mansion. The route there was winding and poorly lit, and the rain made visibility precarious. The darkness that enveloped the mansion made it stand out on the horizon, a sinister and menacing silhouette against the night sky. As they approached the mansion, the surrounding environment seemed to be in complete disharmony. The wind howled like a lament, and the trees acted like silent spectators, bending under the pressure of the wind. The atmosphere was oppressive, and the firefighters shared a feeling of unrest. Chief Anderson briefed the team on the firefighting strategy and emphasized the importance of remaining united and focused on the mission. Everyone heard his words, but the tension was quickly rising as they approached the mansion. The fear of the unknown and the mansion's frightening reputation hung in the air like a thick fog. The abandoned mansion, now engulfed in raging flames, was an impressive and terrifying sight. Flames flashed through the broken windows, creating a hellish dance of light and shadows. As the fire crew began to uncoil hoses and fight the fire, something strange happened. As firefighters began battling the blaze in the abandoned mansion, it became clear that this was no ordinary fire. The flames danced erratically and seemed to resist firefighters' efforts to contain them. It was as if they had a life of their own, a sinister entity that refused to be dominated. As the team struggled to control the fire, they began to hear strange sounds. Unintelligible whispers echoed off the burning walls, and sinister laughter mingled with the crackling fire. The firefighters exchanged worried and confused looks, trying to identify the source of these disturbing sounds. The voices seemed to be everywhere, coming from the shadows and from the flames themselves. No matter where the firefighters looked, they could not locate the source of these unsettling sounds. The tension in the air increased with each passing minute. Chief Anderson led the team with determination, but he himself was feeling the shivers running down his spine. He knew something was deeply wrong in that mansion, something that went beyond the fire they were fighting to extinguish. The electrical power in the area suddenly went out, plunging the mansion into complete darkness. The firemen's flashlights were now the only source of light, and they flickered dimly, creating grotesque shadows on the scorched walls. While trying to restore electricity, firefighters continued to battle the blaze, but the disturbing sounds persisted. The whispers became more audible, and the sinister laughter seemed to intensify. There was no logic to it. It was as if the mansion had a life of its own and was mocking his efforts. The fire team gathered in the mansion's main hall, where the flames were less intense. They looked at each other, sharing mutual concern. It was difficult to concentrate on fighting the fire with those disturbing sounds permeating the environment. It was then that an ominous shadow moved in the shadows, near one of the walls. All eyes turned in that direction, but the darkness made it difficult to identify anything. The shadow seemed to writhe and dance, as if it was feeding on the flames. Chief Anderson shined his flashlight toward the shadow, revealing a tall, hooded figure. His eyes shone with an unearthly shine, and a sadistic smile curved his lips. The figure did not move, remaining motionless in that disturbing position. "Who are you? What do you want?" Chief Anderson asked, trying to keep his voice steady despite his growing fear. The hooded figure didn't respond, but the piercing gaze he gave the firefighters was menacing. Without warning, he vanished into a blur of shadows, as if he had never been there. The void it left behind left the firefighters stunned and astonished. The fire crew continued to fight the fire, but fear hung in the air like a thick fog. Chief Anderson knew something supernatural was happening. The fire, although controlled, was not the real challenge they faced in that haunted mansion. As firefighters continued their desperate fight against the blaze in the abandoned mansion, the storm outside reached its peak. Deafening thunder shook the sky, and lightning ripped through the darkness, illuminating the mansion's bizarre setting. The rain continued to fall incessantly, like tears from the sky itself. The darkness in the mansion seemed to come to life, moving as its own entity. Sinister shadows snaked across the scorched walls, defying logic and reality. As the firefighters advanced through the mansion, they had the feeling that something was watching them, a supernatural presence that enveloped them. Suddenly, the electricity in the mansion went out again, leaving the firefighters in complete darkness. The flashlights, which were already weak from fighting the fire, became the only sources of light. The darkness surrounding them seemed thick, as if they had been swallowed by it. The disturbing sounds persisted. The unintelligible whispers were now audible and incessant. Sinister laughter echoed off the walls like a ghostly chorus. The firefighters, despite their training, could not ignore the feeling that something supernatural was happening. Chief Anderson, although determined to lead his team, felt the weight of fear on his shoulders. He remembered the old stories about the mansion, about how it was said to be haunted. And now, facing that darkness and those sounds, he couldn't deny that there was something terribly wrong that night. While trying to find a way to restore power to the mansion, the team stayed together. They knew they had to face the fire and the darkness that surrounded them. Firefighters were known for their courage and determination, and this mission would be no different. Crews continued to fight the fire, redoubling their efforts as the flames stubbornly held out. The feeling of being watched persisted, and the disturbing sounds seemed to intensify. It was as if the mansion itself was alive, mocking them. It was at that moment that the hooded figure they had seen earlier emerged from the shadows again. His eyes shone with an unearthly shine, and his sadistic smile remained unchanged. He was standing at the entrance to the main hall, watching the firefighters with a sharp gaze. Chief Anderson didn't hesitate. "Who are you? What do you want?" The hooded figure remained silent, but his presence was overwhelming. He slowly approached the firefighters, his eyes glowing with intensity. He seemed to be ecstatic, as if he was feeding on the firefighters' fear. With a cold voice full of malice, Chief Anderson ordered the hooded figure to move away, but his words were ignored. Instead, the figure melted into the shadows, once again disappearing before their astonished eyes. The fire team was now deeply shaken. The fear and tension had reached their limit. They knew something supernatural was happening in that mansion, something that defied all logic and explanation. Even if they controlled the fire, the mystery of the haunted mansion would continue to haunt them, a grim reminder of that terrifying night. Chief Anderson and his fire crew continued to battle the fire in the abandoned mansion, but the atmosphere was charged with tension and fear. The flames, which had resisted their efforts, finally began to subside. However, the darkness and disturbing sounds persisted. As the crew struggled to control the fire, Chief Anderson approached his colleagues, whispering words of courage and determination. He reminded them of their training, of their ability to overcome seemingly impossible challenges. But deep down, he himself was haunted by visions of the hooded figure. It was then that the figure appeared again, emerging from the shadows. His eyes were shining brightly, and he seemed to be approaching the fire team. Chief Anderson, overcoming his fear, advanced toward the figure and confronted it. "Who are you? Why are you doing this?" Chief Anderson asked, his voice shaking slightly. The hooded figure finally spoke, but his voice was like an ominous whisper that echoed in the firefighters' minds. "I am the guardian of this mansion. It belongs to us, to the darkness. You shouldn't be here." Chief Anderson, despite his fear, maintained his determination. He explained that his duty was to protect lives and property, and that included extinguishing the fire in the mansion. He asked the figure to let them carry out their mission. The hooded figure let out a dark laugh. "You humans are so fragile and foolish. The darkness cannot be controlled. It feeds on fear and chaos. And today, you brought chaos to this mansion." The fire crew was confused and terrified. The hooded figure's words were cryptic, and they did not know how to respond to this supernatural threat. As they tried to comprehend the situation, the darkness around them seemed to intensify. It was then that the hooded figure reached out towards the flames. To the shock of firefighters, the flames began to calm down and decrease in intensity. It was as if the figure was controlling the fire with its supernatural power. "You cannot stop the darkness," said the figure. "She always returns." Chief Anderson and his team realized that confronting the hooded figure was futile. They decided to retreat and leave the mansion. As they walked away, the flames continued to mysteriously die out until the mansion was silent and dark again. Outside, the storm finally began to subside, and the rain stopped. The fire crew was shaking with fear and exhaustion. They had no answers for what they had witnessed in that mansion, but they knew they could not forget that supernatural experience. The hooded figure, the guardian of darkness, did not follow them out of the mansion. She remained in the darkness, watching. They never knew what she was, but the memory of that terrifying night would haunt them forever. Crestwood firefighters never reported the truth about what happened in that mansion that night. It was a closely guarded secret, a story that defied explanation and logic. It was a horror story that would fit perfectly into a creepypasta, one of the many horror stories that haunted people's imaginations. And so, the abandoned mansion remained standing, a silent reminder of that night when darkness awakened and challenged the courage of the fire crew. A story that would continue to be told as an urban legend, a haunting story that echoed through the generations,